Cool. And I hope this is going to be helpful for anybody who's got a social enterprise and is looking for EU funding. My name is Chris, and I'm Gordon. I'm CEO of the Irish Social Enterprise Network. And delighted to have Emily Nelson, who is from Access Europe. She's the European Program Manager in Access Europe, knows all about social enterprise, and has got bags of money to give out at any stage, I've heard as well. It's
Yes, it's all
big
true.
cash, big cash. You are expert in social enterprises getting access to European funds and funding. It's a tricky business. Once you know, it can be a little bit easier.
Yep.
Obviously, there's a lot of pitfalls, but there's a lot of opportunities. And Emily, I suppose a lot of people don't even know where to start, but you guys are set up to be able to do that in accesseurope.ie. You are a one-stop shop for Ireland, a national contact point for all the other national contact points.
Hmm.
Welcome. Delighted to have you here.
Thank you. So yeah, I have a bit of a presentation shared, and
Cool.
I can, or to share, and I can kind of go right into that if you like.
Let's do that. Just
Per-
while you're doing that as well, I don't know if you can do two tasks at once, but just tell us a little bit about Access Europe as a thing. You've been involved for the last 2 years or so, 3 years?
yeah, for the last almost 4 years now. So
Four. Good Lord, time is
yeah,
moving.
so we just kind of got our funding renewed to do the next sort of I guess program of Access Europe. So we're really excited about that. So we've got a lot of kind of
Oh,
new innovations and things planned for the next 3 years. But yeah, so I feel like old hat at this. But still learning new things like every day and open to learning more from other people. So yeah.
well, I always learn more information from you. Emily, I suppose we just want to take people through some of those areas. So it'd be really good
Yeah.
for you to fire away.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, so I am the European Programs Manager for the Wheel, and within the Wheel, I manage a program called Access Europe. And so officially, Access Europe is a support and capacity building program to help Irish civil society organizations better access and manage EU funding. But as you said, it's probably easier to think of us as your one-stop shop for all things EU funding and way less of a mouthful. So I'm going to go over our key services a bit later in the presentation. But for now, I'm just going to give kind of a quick overview of the characteristics of EU funding and some examples of specific EU funding programs that might be of interest to social enterprises. So we will start by looking at what EU funding is. So apart from kind of the obvious financial benefits, EU funding has a lot of other benefits that it can provide to social enterprises and civil society organizations. So it's an excellent opportunity to learn and share. So that can be kind of sharing your own expertise and knowledge and best practices with project partners, and also learning from them and from other relevant stakeholders. And when we say other relevant stakeholders, that could be members of the communities that you serve, that these projects will aim to support, or kind of professional networks that you think could benefit from the learnings from your EU funded projects. So e-funding is also a great opportunity to connect with and influence policy. So through EU-funded projects, you can become involved in policy discussions, advocacy networks, and dialogues that influence EU policy, and ideally ultimately national policies as well. And that could be on issues like human rights, environmental protection, health, basically the causes that you're already working on to advance or support in your own communities. EU funding is also an opportunity to be innovative. So you can design and implement projects that are focused on issues that you might not otherwise have the resources to address. So it's a way to kind of try out and test and prototype new initiatives and tools. And in that way, sort of fast track strategic objectives that your core funding might not really allow you to advance. It's also an opportunity to collaborate with partners. So EU funding frequently kind of requires you to collaborate with organizations across different EU countries and foster new partnerships and networks, and in that way kind of build cross-border collaboration. And EU-funded projects are often a way to build your organization and your staff's capacity, so they can help your staff and volunteers to develop expertise in things like project management, financial reporting, and monitoring and evaluation. And this can really empower your staff and also kind of open them up to new sort of skills in areas like digital transformation and advocacy and sustainability. And then it's also a way to build your organizational profile. So EU projects often attract public and media attention, and that can really help to raise the visibility of your organization and to help you attract additional funding because they often can serve as sort of like a seal of approval for organizations. And that can really enhance your reputation and make it easier to gain support from other funders like government agencies. So that's something to be aware of. So that all sounds really great, but in the interest of managing expectations, just going to take a quick look at what EU funding is not. Um, so EU funding is not quick. It is not immediate funding. So there is a lengthy application and selection process, and it often takes time before you actually receive those funds. So if you're looking for a quick fix, then it is not for you. It's not easy. So the application process and project management and reporting requirements can be pretty big. There's oftentimes little flexibility and there's a lot of rigorous monitoring and evaluation, and that is really to ensure compliance and impact with EU regulations. So that can leave little room for deviation from approved plans, and you'll also need to put some resources in for the monitoring and reporting part. But that being said, there are supports here like Access Europe to help you design I guess kind of systems and processes so that that can be easier and a little bit more painless. So EU funding is not without risk. I guess no funding is really. It's not guaranteed, even for well-established organizations. So it's quite competitive, and that means that only a portion of applicants receive funding because you have to keep in mind that you're usually competing with thousands of organizations across the EU. So the budgets might seem huge, but it's spread across the whole continent. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the other thing, which is really important, is that EU funding is mostly not core funding. So it's usually project oriented. So the majority of the budget that you receive will fund activities for a specific project, and it's not going to cover core costs. So it's not going to cover things like salaries or kind of keep the lights on or the doors open. So that's really important to keep in mind. It also sometimes requires co-financing. So that means that organizations might need to secure additional funding or matched funding from other sources to cover the total project costs. So those rates can vary, but mostly fall between 60 to 80%. So it depends on the program and the call. So also something to be aware of. And then EU funding is mostly, again, not national funding. So as I mentioned, it's partnership based, and that usually requires partnerships from different EU member states. So there are some programs where you can have partners just based in Ireland, but for the most part, you will need to kind of work on developing your EU network for transnational projects. So all that said, after hearing all this, you should ask yourself 3 questions. So are you willing to work transnationally and build up European partnerships and networks? Are you willing to work on specific projects with the aim of driving innovation within your organization and sector? And are you willing to build capacity by learning and sharing knowledge with others? And if you have answered yes to 3 of those, then EU funding might be for you. So just to kind of put it into perspective, when you're considering if EU funding is a good fit for your organization, it can be really useful to have a typical EU funding journey timeline in mind. So this is what that might look like. And just to remember also that it is a long-term investment. So we would always advise starting small. So in the first 2 years of your EU funding journey, your aim might be to lead small scale projects or just be a partner on a project. And being a partner on a project is a great way to kind of learn the ropes without the added financial and administrative responsibility of being a lead partner. And you can also learn from all the lead partners' mistakes and learn how to be a better lead partner when you feel confident doing that. So then the aim is that, in 5 years' time, maybe you'll level up. So you've now built enough capacity to scale up to larger projects or leading projects. And then in 10 years' time, you're established in the EU funding world and you're able to take on several projects at once. And EU funding is a key function in your organization. So that might be what a typical EU funding journey looks like. Okay, so now that we've had a quick overview of the characteristics of EU funding, we're going to look at some examples of specific EU funding programs and the kinds of projects that they fund. So there is a whole universe of EU funding programs out there. So I've just selected a few that are relevant to social enterprises. So first up, we have the Erasmus Plus program. So most people have heard of Erasmus Plus before in the context of your kind of Erasmus year in university, but the program is much bigger than that. So it's the EU's program for education, training, youth, and sport, and it supports personal, educational, and professional development in those areas. It has a massive budget of 26.2 billion euro. So the kind of key sort of projects that they fund are mobility and cooperation projects. So mobility projects are essentially an opportunity for staff or volunteers from social enterprises to go and job shadow at a social enterprise in another EU member state and kind of exchange best practice and sort of build your organizational capacity in that respect. And those might be shorter term, like a few months. Then the other type of projects that they fund are called cooperation partnerships. And that's where you partner with other organizations in different EU member states. And that can be anywhere from up to 6 months to 3 years. And you're working together on a project to develop sustainable outputs. So that might be things like training courses, learning platforms, and other resources. So both the mobilities and the cooperation partnerships are really good option for developing resources and supports for your beneficiaries and staff and kind of upskilling as well. So the thing that I usually flag about Erasmus Plus is that it's ideal for organizations that are completely new to EU funding. The application process is a bit more accessible than other EU funding programs, and they also have a small scale partnership project option, which is specifically aimed at smaller grassroots organizations. So you can learn more about the Erasmus Plus program at this link here that links to the EU funding guide on the Access Europe website. And this is an example of an Erasmus Plus project that was led by Mullingar Employment Action Group. So Mullingar Employment Action Group does exactly what it says on the tin. They aim to tackle unemployment in their region, and part of that approach is through their enterprise centers. So Mullingar Employment Action Group led the Be Well project, which was an Erasmus Plus project that had 7 partners from 6 different countries. And the project was designed around the concept of first aid for mental health. So over the course of 2 years, they developed tools and resources for employers and staff to support employee mental health. And that included the development of an online platform with interactive mental health first aid training and handbooks for employers and employees on mental health first aid. So that's a pretty solid example of the kinds of educational and training resources that you can create through Erasmus Plus funding. And again, you can learn more about this project by clicking the link that I've included on the slide. So the next program we're going to look at is the European Solidarity Corps. So the European Solidarity Corps, their overarching aims are to bring young people together, young people and organizations together to build a more inclusive society, support vulnerable people, and respond to societal and humanitarian challenges. And so the program does that by funding young people, and in the EU world, young people are aged 18 to 30. So it brings young people together to volunteer on various causes in their own country and abroad. So projects are funded under either volunteering projects or solidarity projects. So volunteering projects are projects where young people are sent by an organization to volunteer in another European country to exchange ideas, learn, connect, and grow. And then solidarity projects are organized by groups of young people themselves who want to come together and design a project and receive funding to work on it together. So obviously this is of massive benefit to young people, but the European Solidarity Corps can also hugely benefit social enterprises, because then you can apply to host volunteers and have access to quality long-term volunteers to support your work and do things like outreach in the community. So again, you can learn more about the program on the Access Europe website. And then the example I've used here is from Cloughjordan Community Farm. So you may have heard of them. They are a member-owned and operated community-supported agriculture initiative based in Cloughjordan Village. So through the European Solidarity Corps, the farm delivered a project called Regenerative Growth, which was a 12-month project, and that provided volunteers with the opportunity to experience a year's life cycle of organic restorative agriculture and also learn the basics of organic farming. So aside from that, the project really emphasized team building and well-being, and highlighted that the volunteers' work was a response to climate change, overconsumption, and loss of biodiversity. So just an example of the kind of work that you can do and support through the European Solidarity Corps. Again, you can learn more about the project through that link there. Next up, we're going to take a quick look at opportunities through the Interreg programs. So there are a variety of different Interreg programs, and Ireland is eligible to take part in 4 of them. So for the EU's budget period of 2021 to 2027, Ireland can take part in Interreg Northwest Europe, Interreg Northern Periphery and Arctic, Interreg Atlantic Area, and Interreg Europe. So based on the specific Interreg program, there's kind of different participating countries. And then across all of those 4 Interreg programs, they all have 5 main policy objectives to advance. So those are a smarter Europe, a greener carbon-free Europe, a more connected Europe, a more social Europe, and a Europe closer to citizens. So each of those Interreg programs are essentially about bringing sustainable social and economic development to specific areas through a cross-border interregional approach. And an example of an Interreg project that Skull Enterprises in Galway was part of is this Biz Mentors project. So that was an Interreg Northern Periphery and Arctic program project, and it included partners from Finland, Iceland, and Northern Ireland. And it's all about providing access to business expertise to people in social enterprises. So over the course of 3 years, the partners developed a professional software that matches mentees to mentors. And it's software that I believe they still use. So it's a really great example of how being involved in EU-funded projects can allow you to kind of create these really sustainable resources for your organization and your community. So I'd really encourage you to check out that example. And then the last program that we're going to look at is Horizon Europe. So Horizon Europe is the EU's program for research and innovation and has a massive budget of 95.5 billion euro. So its key aims are to tackle climate change, achieve the SDGs, and boost EU competitiveness and growth. And this is just a look at the structure of Horizon Europe, which looks a little bit overwhelming. So it's divided into these 3 pillars, which all have a lot of subcategories that we won't go into today. But the pillars are excellent science, global challenges, and European industrial competitiveness and innovative Europe. So for the vast majority of organizations, leading a Horizon application is not really possible. So they are massive and ridiculously competitive and usually need to involve a wide range of partners from multiple sectors and be extremely detailed in terms of science, research, and the innovative value of the proposal. So they're essentially geared towards university, research institutes, and industries. But that doesn't mean that social enterprises can't play a role. So for societal challenges, we obviously have expertise on and access to communities that's necessary for research to be carried out. And increasingly, this approach of nothing about us without us is being favored by the EU. So better, more impactful results with people at the heart of it. So the Wheel and Access Europe would really encourage social enterprises to partner with researchers and scientists to design solutions and tackle problems together through Horizon Europe funding. And again, here's an example of how that is being achieved. So I'm using this example from Airfield Estate. So Airfield is an agritourism site in Dublin, and their mission is to inspire and enable informed food choices. And their ambition is to become a sustainable food hub and a world-leading sustainable food city. So they are a partner in the Entrust project. That's funded by Horizon Europe under the Marie Curie Doctoral Network. So that funds doctoral programs that are composed of partnerships between universities, research institutions, and small to medium enterprises. And the aim of these kind of doctoral network projects is to enable the training of doctoral candidates and expose those researchers to academic and non-academic sectors so that they kind of get training in both research-related and transferable skills. And this Entrust consortium that Airfield is involved in is made up of 16 research institutions and enterprises from 5 different countries. And essentially, Airfield's participation enables them to host a PhD student who is researching how agri-data from farmers can be made, shared, managed, and used fairly. So then Airfield benefits because they can use that research to inform their own work and impact. So that might be of interest to some social enterprises. So that is a very quick whistle-stop tour of just some of the EU funding opportunities that are out there. If you're interested in learning more about those opportunities and other EU funding programs, we have a whole training on our Access Europe YouTube channel called an Introduction to EU Funding Programs that I would encourage you to watch. Also on the YouTube channel, we have kind of deep dives into the specific programs. So if Erasmus Plus or Interreg piqued your interest, we have specific trainings on those. So I'd encourage you to check those out as well. And then just a little bit about Access Europe. So I mentioned we're a one-stop shop for EU funding. So we do a whole lot of training and events like this one. We also do a lot of research on EU funding programs and deadlines that are relevant to social enterprises. And every month we compile all of those deadlines into our free Access Europe newsletter. So we've kind of done the hard work for you. So I've included the link here in the slide so you can sign up to the newsletter if you like. We also provide one-to-one advice and application support, and can help you find appropriate EU partners for your projects if you want to go down that route. So all of our contact details and social media accounts are here. So don't hesitate to give us a shout if you are interested in starting or scaling up your EU funding journey.
And again, it's a fantastic resource. So anybody you should log on to Access Europe, and you should definitely check out the YouTube channel because there is some really good content. It's constantly been updated. So deeply appreciate that, Emily. Just one or two things, just you've said this kind of before, and you start small and you go through.
Yeah.
And obviously we want people to reach out because the more information they have and the more connections they have, the better. But the most successful applications, they tend to be where it's driven by the social enterprise who has an idea for something that they want to do, rather than, hey, I wonder what anybody else is applying for money for. Let's jump on that bandwagon, right? It's better that you've kind of figure out what you need rather than what you're looking for, what the fund is open for, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's not really about chasing the money, but it's about kind of doing the research and seeing what's out there and seeing where, where your project idea lives within this EU funding programs world. And if you have any kind of questions about where it might live, because as I mentioned, there's a bunch of different programs and it's kind of hard to navigate, then that's kind of what Access Europe is here for, to help to kind of signpost you to the right program for your project idea, for your activities, that kind of thing.
Well, thank you so much. Quick overview. Obviously, we'll leave links and all that sort of stuff for everybody else that people can connect. But hopefully, we'll keep updating and love to keep connecting with you to make sure that social enterprises are getting as much as they can, knowledge wise. Although money wise, let's draw it down if it's valuable and if it's useful and if it moves people forward. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Deeply appreciate it, and
Yeah,
really
you're
look
welcome.
forward to the next time we get to chat about new opportunities.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.